It appears that a rift is forming between Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, someone he brought on to campaign with and for him because her positions are just too extreme. Now, many people on the left argued that the true purpose of Donald Trump's impeachment was not to hurt Trump, but was in fact to hurt Bernie Sanders. They argue a few things. One, impeachment really helped Trump. He raised tons of money. His approval rating is up. Everybody hated it. But it did pull Bernie Sanders off the campaign trail. And as we can see, there is a strong effort to oppose Senator Sanders. He's winning the popular vote, basically, for now. But by getting off of the campaign trail and going and sitting as a juror in the impeachment trial, he needed a surrogate to campaign on his behalf. And that surrogate was Ocasio Cortez, who made very extreme comments, going beyond her normal rhetoric of abolishing ICE, saying that Bernie Sanders is pledging to get rid of customs and border protection. This was it. I commented on it saying they are now overtly calling for open borders. The reason being, the arguments from the left the entire time about open borders was that it's not truly open borders until they say there are no guards and anyone can walk freely across. When you add all these things together, what do you get? A moratorium on deportation, decriminalization of border crossings, and now AOC adding to the rhetoric, abolishing customs and border protection. Apparently, the Bernie Sanders camp sent angry texts to AOC saying that that was too extreme and they're angry about it. They're also mad she never said his name in the first place. Now, another interesting fact in this rift is that apparently Ocasio Cortez was angry that Bernie Sanders' team used the clip from Joe Rogan's podcast, which was essentially an endorsement of Bernie Sanders. So this rift is growing. Surprisingly, it's even Bernie Sanders recognizing that too far left exists even for him. There's a feud going on between James Carville, a famous Democratic strategist, who and him and Bernie are going back and forth. But now we can see how things are getting truly bad for Senator Sanders. A powerful union in Nevada is pushing back against him. And now his supporters are actually harassing, doxing, and targeting members of that union. There's a lot going on right now. When you're in front, expect it because people are going to start going after you. But let's get started and go through all the latest news. One more tidbit I forgot to say. They're actually walking back on Medicare For All because of the unions pushing back on them. But let's get started with this story. Rift forms between AOC and Bernie Sanders on the campaign trail. Before we get started, head over to timcast.com/donate if you'd like to support my work. There's several ways you can give: PayPal, crypto, physical address. But of course, the best thing you can do is share this video. And also, I noticed many people haven't subscribed. So I normally don't say this, but if you do like the content, please consider subscribing, hitting the notification bell, because I do make videos every single day. I actually make like 11 or 12 because I'm a crazy person. But I do hope that at least by sharing the video as well, we can always try to break some echo chambers. Of course, my content is biased, everybody's biased, and a lot of people just don't want to hear what I have to say. I can accept that. Hopefully some people will, though. But let's read. From the DC Examiner, rift forms between AOC and Bernie Sanders on campaign trail. Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders and the leader of the squad are reportedly not seeing eye to eye on the campaign trail. They say Ocasio Cortez is reportedly frustrating the Sanders campaign during her appearances at the Socialists' campaign rallies. While Sanders was occupied in the Senate during the impeachment trial of President Trump, AOC subbed in for him. However, she did not mention the candidate by name during a January rally, though she endorsed him last October. Vanity Fair reported that Sanders' campaign manager, Fayez Shakir, expressed his frustrations to AOC's campaign manager over texts, saying her immigration stances were too extreme. Quote, "Organizing is about tipping people off if you start to see that ICE and CBP are in communities to try and keep people safe," she said in an Iowa rally. "I'm not here to reform some of these systems when we talk about immigration. I'm here because Senator Sanders has actually committed to breaking up ICE and CBP. That's why I'm here." I want to stop and say, the Iowa caucus, Bernie Sanders lost the delegate count in rural communities. He won in urban areas. And I think this statement seriously hurt him. I believe it's fair to say Bernie would have swept Iowa clean if she didn't say this. Saying you want to get rid of border protection obviously is going to affect more conservative leaning areas, not cities who are all about the open borders policy and agree with you. Bernie Sanders ended up losing most of the rural districts or precincts to Pete Buttigieg. Now, he still did get the popular vote, but that's because he won the cities. AOC calling for no border guards at all is one of the most extreme things we have ever seen. It is overt open borders. And if she really believes that, and that's what she wants, then she is advocating for open borders. I want to point out she is a member of the Democratic Socialists of America who believe in open borders. Bernie Sanders has repeatedly tapped far left personalities to join his campaign, and it will be his downfall. They're now learning this lesson. Medicare For All is getting pushback from unions. They might actually abandon it. Let's read more. Some in the Sanders campaign were reportedly frustrated by AOC's comments discouraging cooperation with federal authorities, saying they were off track of Sanders' stance, which opposes open borders. AOC's team was also reportedly frustrated with Sanders' acceptance of comedian Joe Rogan's endorsement. Following blowback, Sanders' spokeswoman distanced the campaign from Rogan, but noted that the campaign will need a big tent of supporters to defeat Trump. Joe Rogan, the most popular podcaster in the world. I'm telling you right now, you want to accept his endorsement, and Bernie's campaign understood that. The problem? They've aligned themselves with radicals and extremists who demand ideological purity. You will not win when these people turn their back on you because you say support Joe Biden or Hillary Clinton or whoever ends up winning the nomination. Bernie Sanders lost a lot of support when he backed Hillary Clinton. More left-leaning people were upset that he did. So these radicals who demand purity, they're using Bernie Sanders as a symbol for now, but they are much more extreme than he is. And he is now reaping the benefits of tapping these people, and he is going to lose because of it. As I stated before, these comments, these views will appear in campaign ads. But let's move on. Quote, "The goal of our campaign is to build a multiracial, multi-generational movement that is huge enough to defeat Donald Trump and the more powerful special interests whose greed and corruption is the root cause of the outrageous inequality in America. Sharing a big tent requires including those who do not share every one of our beliefs, while always making clear that we will never compromise our values," she told The Hill. That's Bernie's, I believe it's Bernie's spokeswoman. "The truth is that by standing together in solidarity, we share the values of love and respect that will move us in the direction of a more humane, more equal world." In addition to AOC's endorsement, Sanders is being supported by Minnesota Rep. Ilhan Omar and Michigan Rep. Rashida Tlaib, people who are wildly unpopular. The polls from Axios last year show that the average American does not hold favorable views. In fact, many Democrats don't hold favorable views. We also saw that when the more information that comes out about the squad, the more people dislike the policies they represent. For now, it seems a lot of people get behind them because they don't know the policies they plan to implement. I'd be willing to bet, based on Gallup's survey showing that America is center-right politically, that most of these people supporting Bernie Sanders or AOC don't realize she absolutely is for complete open borders. Of course, the media always rushes to the defense saying they're not calling for open borders. They're just saying a moratorium on deportations, decriminalize border crossings, and get rid of the border guards. Which, come on, that's open borders. To me, one of the most insane things is AOC's opposition to Joe Rogan's endorsement. This is a level of ideological insanity I did not expect to see. I'd have assumed they would jump on board with Rogan. Everybody wants to go on Rogan. Bernie and Tulsi and Yang were on Rogan. Vanity Fair, who originally reported this, says AOC's team is said to have had concerns about radio host Joe Rogan's controversial unofficial endorsement of Sanders. They go on to mention that, he ended up posting this. Sanders' embrace of the endorsement quickly drew criticism from some corners of the left over past transphobic, homophobic, and sexist comments by Rogan. In a statement, Sanders spokesperson Brianna Joy Gray sought to put daylight between the Sanders campaign and Rogan's views and controversial statements. I read you the quote already, but the reason I highlight this is to make a very, very important point. There is no light that needs to be drawn between them and Rogan's statements, because the comment from Rogan was specifically about, I kid you not, when he said he would consider voting for Sanders, he said, if you highlight only the worst things a person has ever said and focus on that, then you can make anyone look like a bad person. That was the point of his endorsement for Bernie Sanders. And it wasn't even an official endorsement. He said he was thinking he might vote for him. They took that statement where he said, don't focus on these things, and they only focused on the worst of him, exemplifying exactly what Joe Rogan said. And I think this is a good example for Rogan as well, who should probably learn that Sanders' base hates him and will do everything he opposes. Okay, not everything. That's a bit hyperbolic. The point is, If Joe wants to be rational and say, don't do this, don't align yourself with people that do. Now, I get it. You can say that Bernie himself is separate from his supporters, but Bernie needs to call this out more often. Instead, what do we get? A source leaked text messages and a reporter published it. Where's Bernie Sanders to come out and say, I do not want to get rid of the borders? Where is Bernie Sanders to come out and say, no, we need CBP? Ocasio Cortez was wrong. He doesn't have the spine. So this is the story from when she said it. And there hasn't been any real pushback from Sanders except for this leaked message. AOC lauds Bernie Sanders's push to break up ICE and Customs and Border Protection. Now, I got to be honest. I don't remember ever hearing Bernie Sanders saying he wants to get rid of all of the border guards. That seems insane. But there you have it. You see, all of these left-wing outlets were writing about how no one's ever talked about getting rid of the border. They just want laxer laws on immigration. Well, there you go. If you get rid of CBP and you don't want a wall, and Bernie Sanders even said he might consider tearing it down, Beto said he would straight up do it, then what do you think you have? Anybody can cross the border. There's no crime committed because you've decriminalized it and you refuse to deport them. Congratulations. That's just open borders with extra steps. Now, Bernie Sanders is reeling from this. Check this out. You have not been consistent. Voter confronts Sanders on immigration flip-flop. This is incredible. Daily Caller reports a New Hampshire voter confronted Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders on Wednesday about a seemingly evolved immigration platform, pointing out that he used to be opposed to open borders. While speaking at a campaign event in Derry, New Hampshire, one woman in the crowd accused Sanders of inconsistency regarding his immigration positions. The woman noted that at one time, he used to refer to open borders as a Koch brothers-led scheme to import low-wage workers, but now he has turned down his rhetoric against illegal immigration. Quote, one issue that you have not been consistent on is open borders. When you first ran, you said it was a Koch brothers scheme, and it seemed to recognize that low-wage workers being dumped into the country does not help low-wage workers. The woman began, adding that her family stands at 134% of the poverty line. Can you please explain why you changed on that issue? Did you have to change? Because donors seem to want the low-wage workers, she added. I'll point out, Vox noted in 2016, the Democratic Party has become the party of the wealthy. So that scheme Bernie Sanders talked about, it's his party now. These mega corporations love the idea that they can have some kind of serf class working for below minimum wage behind closed doors that no one knows about. And so they want to get rid of, listen, let me put it this way. If you get rid of border guards, if you decriminalize and don't deport, these people won't be citizens. They still have no legal right to work. It is purgatory for them, and it is worse than open borders. At least, if you had open borders, these people would still have legal protections. But as undocumented workers who are not being kicked out, these mega corporations can hire them below minimum wage and never have to get rid of them, never have to pay benefits, not have to abide by any laws. Okay, that's a little bit over the top. They do have to abide by many laws. Obviously, if they do really messed up stuff, people will come in. But if they can't be deported, then what's the punishment? A fine if they find out they're paying below minimum wage, but they're not citizens. They're not legally working either. That's a horrifying prospect. Sanders, who is a top contender for the Democratic presidential nomination, pushed back on the idea that he's changed. He said, what I believe absolutely is, I don't believe in open borders. Open borders means anybody can come from any place in the world. There's no country in the history of the world, I think, that has ever had that view. That is not my view, but my view is that we have 11 million undocumented here. Many of those workers, by the way, are being exploited right now. Trump wants to throw everyone out of the country. If he threw people out of the country, the price of food in this country would skyrocket. Who do you think is picking the crops and planting all over this country? And now Bernie has gone full racist. I'm sorry. It's not true. Okay, it's true to a certain degree. Fine. But I know a lot of people who are around my age, who are white, who pick crops. They actually don't pay low wages like they're trying to claim. This is a myth for the most part. I did a documentary, a mini doc series where I met with farmers. This is a myth. Okay, maybe it's true in the aggregate. I don't know. The places I've been to, and I'll be fair and say, in my experience, in my research, they actually pay something like $14 to $20 an hour for pulling crops. But Sanders has what I would say is a racist view of this. He continued, what we need to do, and I think what the American people want us to do, is rather than demonize the undocumented, what they want is a sensible immigration policy, which includes the following. Now, I want to clarify, I'm specifically talking about crops and planting crops. The point I made earlier, I stand by. that many of these processing plants and factories that were hiring undocumented workers were paying terrible wages in dangerous conditions. But when it comes to farming, a lot of these people are regular Americans who do the farming. But let's move on here from here, because I got to mention this before going into the union debacle. James Carville fired back at Bernie Sanders. Okay, so if you've been following my videos, you'll know that James Carville has been ringing the alarm bells, panicking the end is near. And I mean that literally. He said this is the end of days. So he said it. It's kind of unhinged, but sure, whatever. Bernie Sanders said, whatever, Carville is a political hack. To which James Carville responded with, yes, but at least I'm not a communist. I'm highlighting this. Yes, I understand it's funny. Many of you are probably laughing that this Democrats doing this, but I wanted to show you the rift within the Democratic Party before moving into the union debacle that Bernie is facing. Moderate mainstream Democrats do not like Bernie, do not like his plans, and they may have to lose the Medicare For All position, which is funny considering that's their strong activist position they're now walking back from, including Ocasio Cortez. But before we get into that, I want to now show you the real boots on the ground grassroots opposition that Bernie Sanders faces. Nevada's powerful culinary union declines to endorse a 2020 candidate. Joe Biden had been in the running for the group's support. Now, this is important because in Nevada, you've got the food service, the hospitality industry, you got all the casinos and everything. So these people have significant power, and they're saying no. They issued a flyer where they basically said, so here's the story from the Hill. Sanders faces rare union opposition in Nevada over Medicare for All. They issued flyers saying that if the union supported Sanders, they would lose their private health insurance. They would. Sanders had said it repeatedly. And because of this pushback, lo and behold, Sanders and AOC are talking about backing down. Ocasio Cortez admits Bernie Sanders may have to scrap Medicare for All plan. Even AOC, as soon as she got elected, walked away from some more of her activist-y positions. And it was kind of funny to see all these activists cheering for her to get elected. And then all of a sudden she was moving back closer towards a more mainstream Democratic Party. Now, of course, she's not. But she used to be much more ideologically driven than she is today. And that's saying a lot considering how much she already is, calling for CBP to be abolished. Now, here's where things get crazy. In response to this flyer being sent out, Bernie Sanders supporters started targeting the culinary union. Now, what I find funny here is that they say the Bernie Bros attack line is a myth. And it mostly is. I will absolutely admit it is. Check it out. All of these journalists complain that whenever they put up bad information about Sanders, they get harassed on the internet. Oh, heavens me. Is that it? Someone sent you some mean tweets? Please. That is not a Bernie Bros scenario. That is ridiculous. However, when the culinary union put out flyers saying Sanders will take your health care, they were doxxed and harassed. That means their private information was being published. Bernie Sanders had to call this out in what I would consider to be a pseudo-apology. The Hill reports, Sanders on Thursday encouraged supporters of all campaigns to refrain from online attacks following the Nevada Culinary Workers Union allegations of online harassment from Sanders supporters over its disagreement with his health care plan. Bernie Sanders came out and said to supporters, what do you say, supporters of all campaigns. Oh, because he doesn't want to mention that they called him out specifically. Let me stop you right there. The union said it was Sanders supporters doing it. And Bernie couldn't find a spine somewhere to say, knock it off. Don't ask me why. He's got a bunch of crazy supporters doing crazy things, and he needs to tell them to stop. But he won't do it. Quote, harassment of all its forms is unacceptable to me. And we urge supporters of all campaigns not to engage in bullying or ugly personal attacks. He says, our campaign is building a multi-generational, multiracial movement of love, compassion, and justice. We can certainly disagree on issues, but we must do it in a respectful manner. Sanders continued by saying he would not do anything to diminish the health care that the unions and workers have fought for, and promising that Medicare for All would expand all health care. The union called it disappointing when Sanders supporters went after the organization after it distributed a flyer saying Medicare for All would end culinary health care. Under Sanders' health care plan, private insurance would no longer exist. The union has decided not to endorse a Democratic president before Nevada's February 22nd caucuses, instead calling to focus on voting President Trump out of office, expanding health care for its workers, and reforming immigration policy. So, well, there you go. I mean, you reap what you sow, buddy. You brought on Linda Sarsour, you brought on AOC, and now they are dragging you down. Of course, Medicare for All was always part of Bernie Sanders' plan. So is, I'm doing air quotes here, free college, because it's not. The problem is, and I'll tell you this, with those plans, at least for me as a more moderate individual, admittedly, I've recently said I'm not going to vote in the primaries because it's a mess anyway, and I'm not confident they're going to honor my position even if I did, so I'm out. We'll see what happens. But the problem with these positions is that they're one size fits all. The government should run it, and it abolishes any competition. I'm not a competition absolutist. I don't think the free market works perfectly. I think we need some oversight and regulation. But I'll tell you this. Taking the very few choices we already have and condensing it into a single choice will just make things worse. And that's why these unions don't like it. Unions represent regular Americans. And it's not the first time there has been pushback to the far left. When AOC announced the Green New Deal, we saw the AFL-CIO, which is, I believe, the largest organization of labor unions in the world, denounce it, saying that it was going to take their jobs away. Bernie, you made a serious mistake bringing on Ocasio Cortez. And you can see it in the news reporting in what they're saying to her. It is too extreme. Which brings me to the final point. Ocasio Cortez is sponsoring a bill to ban fracking across the U.S. Now, I'll be the first to say, I have serious reservations about fracking. There have been major complaints and environmental issues around fracking that need to be addressed. I, for one, am not a big fan. But I recognize the economic benefits we receive and that people work in this industry. Getting around that is a serious political challenge. I can morally grandstand and say, look, man, we got to figure out better ways than this and improve green technology. I don't know, cold fusion, figure something out, right? Whatever it might be, improve our solar capacity, build massive batteries to store this energy, wind power, whatever it is. But I know this. One of the biggest mistakes Hillary Clinton made was when she said she wanted to get rid of coal jobs. It didn't scare the few coal workers we have left. It scared everyone in the energy sector. She was talking about a couple hundred jobs because coal mining has kind of gone away. But everybody who works in any kind of fossil fuel industry felt it. Ocasio Cortez, campaigning for Bernie Sanders, is too extreme. And she's sponsoring a bill to ban fracking across the U.S. This will resonate much more heavily than anything Hillary Clinton could have ever said. I wouldn't be surprised if energy sector unions issued a statement rejecting Sanders and his surrogates. These people represent Bernie. He brought them on. Which brings me to the very last point, wrapping it all the way to the beginning. Impeachment. Was impeachment really designed to hurt Trump or Sanders? I can't tell you. It did not hurt Trump. It helped him. He raised record money. His approval rating is up, and I can say it a million times, but you get it. Bernie Sanders was taken off the campaign trail, and the person he tapped to campaign for him has hurt him substantially. So much so, it is now being aired out in the public, and we can see it. It was bad news. It was a mistake. But Bernie had no choice. He couldn't campaign. He had to go to this sham trial. And I call it a sham, not because the Republicans didn't vote for witnesses, but because there was no real criminal offense. It was an opinion. And he had to sit there for a foregone conclusion. We knew the Republicans would acquit. It was a waste of time. They needed 67, 2/3 of the Senate. That's absurd. It would never happen. And Bernie could not campaign. Lo and behold, AOC comes out and says something absolutely ridiculous. I'm not going to pretend like the Democratic establishment is playing 4D chess, but it worked out for them, didn't it? Hey, man, I've been warning about the far left push for a while, and there is a reasonable position for Bernie Sanders to hold, but he's bringing on the most extreme people he can find. Don't ask me why. We've seen it in the Project Veritas leaks. It only gets worse, and that's what you get when you bring these people on. I'll leave it there. Stick around. Next segment's coming up at youtube.com/TimCastNews at 6 p.m. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all in the next segment.